User stories are a mechanism to capture how a campaign will work. They're a way to record how the automated workflow should behave. User stories are written in this format. So as a role, I want goal desire so that I get a certain benefit. You'll notice this is written from the perspective of a prospect or customer, who's known as the user. It's done this way to ensure that the marketer always keeps in mind the value to the audience. So let's go through an example for Dyson. User story could be, as a parent, I want to win a free Dyson so that I can experience the allergen filters for free. Once the user story has been written, it gets broken down into a sequence of steps required to fulfill that story for the prospect or customer. So for example, the steps for this would be I receive an email with an offer, I go to the registration page, I register my interest, I get a confirmation email to ensure I'm in the draw. So these are the steps required to fulfill that particular user story. After that, we translate these steps into automated workflow. A workflow sequence is one way to map a user story to the automated workflow, which is a series of triggers and actions. Generally, workflows can be drawn on paper using a sequence diagram, like the one displayed here. They don't need to be formal requirements documentation. They're just a handy way to be able to translate a user story to an actual automated workflow in your automation platform. Sequence diagrams are fairly easy to understand. They capture triggers on both sides, so for example, from the automation platform as well as the prospect or customer, and then the resulting actions. So on this diagram, you can see the sequence line, which is the dotted line under automation platform, and also the prospect or customer has the same sequence line. So moving from top to bottom, this is sequence over time. In this particular trigger, we have a scheduled trigger, which is on a particular date and time, a certain action will be triggered. And the action is the line that goes across, which is the send invite email. So what we're doing is we're sending the invite email to the prospect or customer as a result of a scheduled trigger. So as an example, let's map the Dyson user story to a sequence diagram. So we've already got the first trigger in action. Let's continue from there. So here's an example of a trigger occurring from the prospect or customer side, which is the prospect opening the email. You'll notice that there's no label on the dotted line, and also there's no action occurring from the automation platform. So in this particular case, it's a trigger, but nothing actually occurs. In contrast, this is a similar trigger that occurs on the prospect side, but there is an action that results on the automation platform side, which is to record that action. The next step is when the prospect or customer fills in the form. That's a trigger which will actually trigger an action on the platform side, which is to record an action. But not only does it do that, it also triggers another action in response, which is to send the confirmation email. So here's an example of a trigger triggering an action, which then triggers another step back to the prospect. And we continue like this. This is a wait step where all we're doing on the automation platform is waiting a certain amount of time. When that time is up, that triggers an action. In this particular case, what we're displaying here is that this action hasn't occurred. Thus, the cross and the arrow not actually reaching the automation platform. So what we're saying here is the prospect or customer has not filled in a form. So after 3 days, what will occur is if no form is filled out, so this is a conditional trigger, so it's saying, okay, if the form wasn't filled out, then we're going to resend the email invite. So that's the action that's triggered, sent to the prospect or customer. So it's a really simple example of how you can map a user story to a sequence of triggers and actions, which is then very easily translated into a marketing automation platform.